Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
But to kind of dive into today's episode, how we got started in dirt track racing, my story, I guess we'll just kind of get right into it. My story was unique in a way because I think one thing we could both say, well, yours is actually probably a little bit different, but my parents weren't racers. So the fact that I ended up being a dirt track racer at all is kind of crazy because the chances weren't very high.
We're both first-generation racers, actually.
Yes. So my dad never raced. My mom never raced. And so for me, it was more the fact of circumstances and just how it all kind of played out. I ended up behind the seat of a race car, and it all kind of took place in about 2008. So I was 5 years old at the time, and I made a whole YouTube video on it, but my story wasn't really straight. It was funny, after I made it, a couple people were like, no, this is kind of what happened, you know? And so this is going to be the accurate version, I guess you could say in the podcast, the long form. So it's 2008. I just kind of started playing a couple of sports like soccer and I think t-ball or baseball at the time. So the interest was there to be athletic, you know, but I never thought about being a race car driver. I mean, for you, did you feel like, you know, around 5 or 6 was when you kind of got that spark?
Yeah, that's 5 or 6. I started when I was 5, and I think at the time that was the only sport I was playing. I think maybe shortly after I got into cross country, but my only sport was racing, and that's all I really knew from my dad.
Gotcha. Yeah. So like for myself, it started in 2008, and I didn't really know a whole lot about what I wanted to do, but I do kind of remember, you know, one thing that was always on the TV was NASCAR and like the Nationwide Series, or that's what it was called at the time. Crazy how time flies. Now it's the Xfinity Series, but the Nationwide Series and trucks a little bit. And, you know, the Cup Series. And I think back then they had like the Car of Tomorrow and all this. It's just insane how time changes. But we got started, and my dad just always kind of had the NASCAR thing playing on the TV. And I think they had went to a couple of like dirt track races in the past. So my mom on her side, she talked a lot about being down from Monterey, California. You know, she had went to Ocean a little bit, you know, I think when she was younger, but not a lot, more like just like a fun thing to go and try out. Not as a fan really, just to go see what it's about. And so she had went to the races a little bit. My dad had went to Sonoma or Infineon. I think at the time he went, it was called Sears Point even.
Sears Point,
So he went down there and he watched the races a little bit. And so there was just like that fan kind of, you know, being a little bit of a fan of the sport, but just, you know, not really sure what's going on. Just to like go and do something and be at an event. So I did not come from a family of racers. That's kind of their background on it. But we got started, and actually my dad had a buddy that he was working with through his business, and there was a customer. Well, the customer happened to have a couple of Outlaw Karts, old Outlaw Karts, not like brand new. I don't even know if they were QR. I don't even think they were.
I think my first Outlaw Kart was a SKE, I think.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it was old.
Mine might have been a homemade chassis. I mean, you know, it was not anything too fancy. It was a very old Outlaw Kart. So anyway, this guy had this Outlaw Kart, and my dad's friend, whose name was Bob, I know he's going to be pumped I mentioned his name because I did it in that one video. He was the one that set this story straight. So my dad's friend, Bob, he was, you know, the one that kind of convinced my dad, like, hey, you should get Tanner involved in racing. You should try it out. Like, this would be something fun for the family. And I think one of the things, too, was like, if it doesn't work, we'll just sell the car. You know, it's not a big deal. I don't think the car was very expensive or however we acquired it. We might have even, my dad might have even, like, traded a little bit of work with this customer for the car is what happened. Because I think when I first told the story, it was like it was on the side of the road, which in a way it was. But anyway, so we acquired this cart, and it was like an old QRC, and it had a purple top wing and orange body. It was not a very pretty looking cart. And I just remember it had an old Briggs & Stratton thing that you kind of like, you had the little machine to start it up and whatnot. And that's just how kart racing was back then. It wasn't, you know, super fancy kind of like to where it's at today, where, you know, there is, I guess, more money involved in the sport, which is a good thing. But, you know, it was just at a different spot. And here in Southern Oregon, it was actually more popular then than it was today. So got racing, and I remember we went to the Southern Oregon Speedway for the first time. Like, went out to the track just to watch, and we met a couple of people. We were walking through the pit area. You know, I didn't know what I was getting into. I actually always joke, and this is dead serious. I thought when I first got into kart racing that like I was in a lower form of NASCAR. Like, I'm 5 years old.
Yeah.
I legit think I was good. I was starting the truck series, or I thought we were going to have pit lane. Like, I did not know anything about dirt racing. I'd only watched asphalt. So anyway, go to my first race, and I remember we met these people called the Fosters, and that's not the same Fosters from down in California. Their name was actually, the driver's name was Bartley Foster, and I think the dad was Bart Foster, and somehow we met them, and I think it was because actually, like, I gotten a bloody nose. It's weird. I was in the pit area. I had a bloody nose, and those were the people that helped us in the pits, and there was a couple of them in a group, so we became friends with them, talked with them, and they actually, said, hey, when you guys come to your first race, you can pit next to us, whatever. Yeah. So we ended up being friends with them the first couple of years in karting while we were racing there at the Southern Oregon Speedway. And I just remember my first race, obviously I was slow. We went there, and I didn't know what to expect, and I think my parents, the funniest part is, I wouldn't say they were like getting mad at me, but they didn't get why I wasn't fast. They were typical box stock parents.
You see all these other kids that have kind of been doing it a little bit longer, and you're like, hey, why is my kid not doing that? Is there something wrong, And
I think that's where it's so relatable for parents, to kind of be that way. Like, why is my kid not fast? Why is he not stepping on the gas? And there's even some old videos that my mom has, because we've videoed like everything. Yeah. Doesn't mean we necessarily have the footage, because it was on old camcorders, from the stands. And my mom wasn't even the videographer. It was her friend Beth, which is now actually married to Bob. So Bob and Beth are family friends. They got me into it. But Beth was the filmer, and she had to film because my mom literally couldn't. She would shake too bad. Like the camera, it's that. And so and camcorders were not as good back then, to where, maybe if you're shaking a little bit, the camera has stabilization or something to help you. So anyway, got started. I wasn't very quick. And I just remember the first night, one of the things I vividly, like it was yesterday, was going into turn 1, the Southern Oregon Speedway had no wall, which was a good thing. But I remember I like flew off the track. I drove off into one, and instead of just like driving, staying, I thought I had to stop. So like I was NASCAR, like I was spun out. So I just stopped there, and they threw the yellow, and they came out and got me, and they, keep going. Yeah. So that was like the one thing I remember was wrecking, or you could say wrecking, and, keeping going and finishing the A-main event. But I got lapped a couple of times. There was actually some pretty fast kids. But obviously, it took me a whole season to really get up to speed. Yeah. And I think I won my first race at the end of like my first or second season. Yeah. But it was it was like a weird non-points race or whatever at the end. So it took me a while, and it was just one of those things of like, trying to. It's a lot harder for a kid than you would think, especially when they have no background at all. I think if my dad was a racer and I was used to watching him, or, just being in that atmosphere, it's way different. I think I would have been way faster.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just I didn't have anyone to look up to, and I had parents that wanted to quit after a couple races because I was the slowest kid on the track. So it's just crazy where it kind of goes to. So after that first season, I got that win, and that was a confidence booster, because I remember some of the kids I was racing around, not even sure if they're going to listen to this podcast, but there was like a SpongeBob car. Yeah. There was, another kid that was number 19. I think his name was Connor. So that was one of the other drivers. But it's just crazy, going from that, and also where the Southern Oregon Speedway was, because that's my local track. We're located here right outside of Medford. That's where, our shop is. That's where we live. I'm born and raised here. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of like our home track. And at the time, that was the place to race on Friday nights. And then there was other tracks that they could run at on Saturday. So it's kind of unfortunate that kids don't have that same situation now, really, for like getting into outlaw karts and whatnot. But then after we started running the Southern Oregon Speedway, and, all that happened of like my dad and his friend Bob, getting the car and getting me out to the track for the first time. And those guys literally right there with me. Yeah. And I think another thing to note, because, and I know you'll have another take on this as well. Yeah. My first trailer, we had talked about this in a couple episodes ago. We had a snowmobile trailer. Yeah. So that was our first trailer that we took to the races, and there was no cabinets in it at all. No cabinets. There was just like some rubber on the ground for where the snowmobiles were supposed to be. So in my first couple of races, a lot of my friends came out to support me, because it's like the thing, like, oh, my buddy's racing, but like no one ever actually thought like, this kid may be going to keep racing. It's just like, it'd be like me going to my buddy's football game. Like, it's the same thing. Yeah. And a couple of my friends, and I remember we had so much food, snacks for everyone, coolers, whatever, but no cabinets. I don't think we had a lot of spare parts. It was just like, put air in your tires and go, and just go out there and see what happens. If you hit something, you hit something. I don't think I tore up, I did tear up a little bit because, hear what I have to say in a minute. But, we didn't have a lot of spare stuff, and we just kind of went out there and raced. And one of the main things, as you can relate, my parents always buckled me in. Obviously I didn't do my belts. I just remember like I had a little spine seat, we call them, just one of the little, maybe they're,
I had the same thing.
Maybe Kirky brand or something, but you have one of those and, I didn't have like a Hans.
Yeah.
I had some sort of head and neck restraint, but it went all the way down my back and it kind of came up between my legs, and it was like a second crotch belt that that's how it latched in. So
that's fancy. I just had a donut.
Yeah, well, so it was weird. So my head and neck restraint also had a donut with it. It was weird. So so I had my donut on, which not a lot of people run anymore, which is a good thing because they're not as safe as the current Hans or hybrid that we now have today and they offer. But anyway, and those plugged right into my helmet, and my dad would always, strap me in and do my visor and do everything, and my chin strap and stuff. So I just remember, man, those were kind of the days of getting started, and it's just so funny to see how my parents, were the box stock mom, were the box stock dad, thinking their kid was going to be so good. But I guess to kind of end my story of getting started, that first race, the second race was pretty similar. I do actually remember in my second race, there was a kid that I'm still friends with today. His name's Gabe Nelson, and he had a car, and he was running, I think, second or third in the A main event, or maybe, I don't know, at some point we were passing him, and I was actually running up front because I ran in the back on my first race, but my second race, I was up front because I think I just had a good pill, and I just ended up not being too bad, but I couldn't pass this one car. So I'm riding around slow behind this one car, and everyone is just passing. But, it's just like the typical starting move. So I just couldn't get past this one kid. And so that was kind of my second race. And then my third race, I ended up flipping 9 times. So that's my story of getting started, and how I flipped 9 times was I actually just got a little high off of turn 4 at Southern Oregon because that was the place we were racing. Yeah. And this other kid was coming on the track. So he thought that when he spun out, he would have to, go off the track. Like I'm talking at Southern Oregon, here's like the wall. You go off this way and you come on over here. So it's like a complete circle. So he drove all the way off the track, and they still let him on the track. He went all the way through staging after he wrecked. Yeah. And, he was a beginner as well. Right. He drove on the track. Well, I had got too high, and I actually have some footage of it that I played in a video before, but they barely caught it because my mom, I think, dropped the camera. But, just plugged him, KO'd the wall and then KO'd him, and we both wrecked. So I flipped 9 times, and that was kind of my introduction to dirt track racing. So what a fun turn of events. And then after that, we became racers, and my parents kind of learned how to handle it and kind of be a coach in a way, even though they had never raced. And you just talk to people, you make friends, lifelong friends, and you're hooked. That's just how it goes.